I'm so glad you joined our podcast of Heard Discovered Power. I'm Dave Jones with Captive Coaching and Empowerment, and I'm a personal discovery and performance coach. And for many years, I've worked with people all over the country, helping them eliminate their emotional hurdles that have prevented them from getting wherever they wanted to go. But my focus and my passion is helping women realize their inner strength and unrealized authority. It's extremely important to me and is my focus because of the emotional trauma my own mother experienced growing up that impacted her throughout her entire life without her ever knowing it, at least not knowing why. I help my clients eliminate their emotional impact from guilt, shame, fear, and trauma that have made good hearted and pure spirited women feeling they just aren't enough in their careers and in relationships or parenting, and I help them become empowered to be the goddesses and the power managers that sometimes our system discourages them from being. I help them become the me that she was meant to be. I'm joined every episode with my dear friend and former coaching client, Sherry. Okay, Sherry, what is the topic we are tackling today?
Well, good morning, David, and welcome everyone to season 3. We really appreciate your ongoing support, and we are so happy to be back here again, right, David?
We sure are, Sherry. Thanks for always doing this with me.
I'd like to start the season and explore the concept of happiness, David. I think from my perspective, I often notice that many people, while on the surface they seem happy, but they don't seem genuinely happy. Everything looks fine, smiles, their success, their busy lives, but underneath, I feel a heaviness from them. I mean, miserable may be a strong word, but in many cases, it feels like that's closer to the truth than simply not happy. I'm wondering too if some people may even convince themselves that they're happy. Maybe they feel they should be because their life on paper looks good or the expectations of others. But when you ask them a simple question, and I remember you asked me this, what makes you happy? Many people struggle to answer. So I think it raises an important question, David. Is unhappiness rooted in not having what truly would bring us contentment? Or is it that people don't actually know what makes them happy in the first place? And then there's this idea of wants and desires. We're often, and you see it in so many people, chasing something that's just ahead of them, believing that once we achieve it, we'll be happy. But what is a want really? Is it simply a desire for the future, something we hope to attain? I looked this up in the dictionary. According to Merriam Webster, success is a favorable or desired outcome. But does achieving what we want really lead to actual happiness, or are we mistaking success for fulfillment? I feel like that's a big question and a lot to unpack.
Well, it is a lot to unpack, Sherry. And boy, we're digging into something pretty deep right off the bat, opening up season 3. And I think that's really important because I've noticed over the years with my coaching clients that it is so commonly disregarded question, Sherry. That question is, what do we truly want? Now, what I've run into, especially in my personal development coaching, not so much in the performance coaching if I'm working with a golfer or an executive, right, Jerry? But in the personal development coaching, it comes down to, from my experience, people typically never come to see me until they have an element of pain that they want to rid themselves of. Because most of the time, people aren't reaching out to a personal development coach on a non-professional basis for only their personal needs until there's pain, until there's some level of their life that they want to change. It might be a breakup, it might be a loss of a loved one. They might be struggling with their self-worth that has caused other pain, but nonetheless, they're looking to get rid of the pain. You with me on that?
I'm shaking my head here because that resonates with me. I think pain becomes the motivator. I mean, it's loud, you can't ignore it. So you really have to start examining it. And that's what I did with you years ago.
That's exactly right. And typically, a person really is not going to seek outside or external help until their pain has reached the level that they can't really do anything about or deal with on their own. That's about the only time where I have the ability to ask somebody what they really truly want, outside of a friend or a party atmosphere. And I think when we are looking at what people seem like on a daily basis, whether or not it's people walking through the store or people in our life, our work life, our personal life, it's not like there's a lot of people walking around with a smile on their face, is it, Sherry?
Mm-mm. No, I think it's more common than you think.
I really do. I really do. And it's really kind of tragic because the reason I was mentioning that people come to me when they're in an element to a certain extent of pain that they want to rid themselves, there are a whole host of people. We know that a lot of them are in that same boat, in that same struggle. And the reason I call it a struggle is because until we get to a certain level of pain, we really won't consider what we are wanting. As an example, years ago when I went through some struggles and in almost a former life, it feels like, and I went to my therapist, one of the first things that she said was, "Well, why are you here?" I'd go into all of this pain, just like clients do with me now from a coaching standpoint rather than therapy, right? Issue is this: until we actually determine what we want, we tend to accept what we have. If we tend to accept what we have, it's almost like we're programmed to do the next step rather than consider what our next step could be. I wonder whether or not that resonates as I'm talking about the pain, because I think the simple answer that I think most people kind of feel is that they're living in a world where maybe they don't say this to themselves, Sherry, but it's almost parenthetically, this is as good as it gets, or this is what they need to settle for. And I think that happens a lot of the time. That doesn't bode well for an extended time of contentment or that elusive concept of happiness. What are you thinking on that?
I'm thinking as you were saying that, it never occurred to me as I was even entering young adulthood to think about what I want. I think we need to instill this in children to start thinking about it. I didn't think about it until my life blew up.
That's what I'm talking about. Until there's a level of pain that we're seeking to eliminate, right? You know,
Mhm.
it you mentioned children there. Well, there is a point where children are all about what it is that they want,
Good point.
right? But then we start training them to believe that this is what is supposed to occur. And there needs to be a marriage between what we have to do from a practical aspect, as well as still continually evaluating what it is that we truly do want. And we can't really talk about desires or want as we conceive the process of achieving success. We talk about success so much in a business realm, and I'm developing an introductory course to try to help people really conceive what success is. But we can't really do that until we truly dig down into what we want. There's two types of wants. If we have a relative that we really admire, we might decide and grow up wanting to be like them or to do what they did, almost like a connection through osmosis. Because my uncle was a firefighter and I admired, and this is true as a matter of fact, and I admired the heck out of him, I might make the unconscious association that I want to be a firefighter because I want to be like Uncle Jimmy. Does that make sense?
It totally does.
That can arise in such a manner that I grab onto because I kind of have made that association. And on an emotional basis, I'm really making that connection of that firefighter with Uncle Jimmy. Well, what happens when I become a firefighter and that doesn't truly fulfill me? Now, don't get me wrong. Maybe firefighter is, being a first responder. It's such a noble profession. I'm not trying to denigrate anybody who's doing that. We're talking about wanting our wants to actually be fulfilling for what we want rather than it fulfilling the expectations of others. Does that make sense, Sherry?
It does. I mean, our parents and the people around us are shaping all expectations for us. We don't think about it.
Now, here's another thing that plays a large role so often is when we have a person, a child who comes up through adulthood, but they don't have a loving family or they don't have a supporting system. And maybe they are one of the many people who unfortunately have gotten the attitude from their caretakers that, hey, Jimmy or Jenny, you can't do that. You don't have the ability to do that. Now we have the concept of wanting to prove them wrong. I remember saying to a dear friend of mine's mother years and years ago, I was trying to give her a compliment that her son was such a hard worker. And I said to her, and I was probably 25 at the time, and I said, I don't think I could work as hard as he does. And she literally said to me, Sherry, we all know you couldn't, David.
Oh,
I swear
wow.
to I swear to everybody listening, that is true, and my buddy that I still talk to, if he ever listens to this, he's gonna know exactly that moment. I swear to you, I was 25, 26, somewhere around there, and to this day, every single time I accomplish something that I thought was tough, I think of that woman.
Yeah. Ouch. That was a hard one.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is sometimes I'll have a coaching client, and this happens so often when somebody, whether or not a loved one knows that they're doing it or does it intentionally, they absolutely denigrate the likelihood or the belief that this person or this child can do something, right? It impacts their concept of their value and whether or not they're believed in. And then they come with the concept of, oh, I'll prove her wrong or I'll prove him wrong. And that creates a motivation, what I call toward relative success, because it's relating to somebody else's, not an internal emotional desire, right? Now we have the motivation not to fulfill ourselves, but merely to prove somebody else wrong.
I think women have the added pressure of society and the expectations there for us to get married, have a kid, have a career.
Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the reasons that we're having this topic. Often I'll use anecdotal circumstances on this show, Sherry, but this is absolutely factual. Over the last, I'd say 5 or 6 years, I have had three coaching clients who have made the decision that they did not ever want to get pregnant and have children. When they would get together with family, they always had to prepare themselves, and this would come up within our sessions to such an extent we would, discuss about having these automatic canned responses so that they were not feeling the emotional intonation that their family is giving them. Because every time they'd say, well, when are you going to start having children? When are you going to settle down and have children? That was always interpreted as though they weren't good enough, that having a child was some way indicative of being an adult, being a productive member of society, having any worth. In reality, these three women were some of the most evaluative women to decide that they didn't want to have children just to have children. As you and I have talked about, Sherry, one of the difficulties of parents and children is there's so many parents that just have children because that's the next step, right? Or that's the thing they're expected to do. And then they don't know how to become good parents. It's really tremendously evaluative in those circumstances. So when you talk about women having this societal pressure, absolutely so much more than men. And it's not just to have children and be a homemaker and try to wear 14 different hats of being a CEO, coming home. And what was that old commercial about frying it up in the pan and wearing all these hats from that time where they were growing up and society was telling them? and even their caretakers, from their dolls to every different scenario, right? Of what their life was supposed to look like.
Oh, it's never ending too. I mean, even at parties, when are you get engaged? When are you getting married? When are you having a kid? When are you having your second kid? It never stops.
Exactly. And I submit this to every single one of our listeners. From a male standpoint, this does not come up with men.
Really?
No, it is not
Ugh.
where guys sit around and say, "Hey, when are you getting married? When are you having kids? When are you gonna" No. Now, they might say once somebody has a child, they might say, "Are you gonna have another?" And
Like, are you sure?
exactly.
So different.
Exactly.
That is so different than what we experience.
That's my point, and that's one of the reasons that, we do this, but it's a huge distinction. Years ago, there was a popular comedian, Sherry, and I think it was George Carlin. I'm not sure. I might be giving credit to somebody else. Well, he stood up in front of the audience and he said, adults, when they're around kids, they always go, "Hey, what do you want to do when you grow up?" And he says, "Do you know why we do that to children? Why we ask that? Because we're looking for ideas."
That's funny.
It is, right? Sherry, it made me really think that maybe there's so much truth to that because we really don't ever know what we want to do. We know what we were expected to do,
Oh, that's powerful.
isn't it?
Mhm. Heavy.
And it's so often that we start to not even consider what we want to do until we're quite a ways down into our adult life when we realize all of a sudden, because of whatever event has occurred, that maybe we don't enjoy what we're doing.
Yeah.
Then it becomes, what do we do now? Do we accept it? Do we stay with it? Do we merely become that person who's walking down the store aisle, almost like a Stepford wife or a Stepford husband who is just laser focused? Okay, this is my next step. This is what I have to do. There's more to our lives than that, and for our women, we want to have the ability to make them aware and empower them that if they are one of the people, like so many of us that have gone through this, we want to be able to wake them up and say, "Wait, you deserve so much more than this," right?
Well, not only that, as you're saying it, yes, I wanna wake up the people that are living that, but I would like to start our young girls on a different path so they don't become 30 years old in some unhappy place.
Absolutely. I know that you and I, all the time, whenever we're being interviewed or talking about this podcast, I always ask them to share it with as many young women as possible, and to the parents or the dads to share it with their daughters, because this is some of the stuff that needs to, like you just said, get to our young women way earlier so that they don't fall down that same pathway that society has created those expectations, right?
I honestly never thought about it, so how do we get young girls to start thinking about it?
Well, I remember when you and I were coaching and we were going through our sessions, there's a point that I do with all of my clients where I try to get them to nail down exactly what their desires are, right? What their passions are, what their purpose might be, help them reveal that to themselves, or what their gifts might be. One of the things that is so impactful and why I always like being able to get to somebody who's much younger is getting them to evaluate what they will receive and achieve emotionally from accomplishing, right? Because so often as young men and young women, we're trained that let's get our education, let's get our employment, and we work hard, we make lots of money, but it's never about what makes us fulfilled or content. And I don't know if you remember.
I remember because it made me very uncomfortable. I think as women, we are serving so many other people that we don't really I don't know if it's not that we're not allowed to, but we just never really thought about what we want. And that moment be made me uncomfortable.
right? What we determine in that circumstance, because not only it made you feel uncomfortable, and it's so common with all my clients that when we get to that point of having them realize what they really do want, it's almost like they're unable to go back to what they thought they were willing to accept before. And that's what was causing some of the pain that they were attempting to free themselves of. And that's why we want everybody to be able to get this before they have to experience any of that pain, right?
Right. It was eye opening and it gives you freedom.
Absolutely. I remember a scenario. I was probably 24, 25. And I had left the first college that I had gone to. I had really discovered, even though I wouldn't admit myself then, I left out of fear because I just didn't fit in, right? And I had gotten a job as a bank teller. And I'm driving to work one morning, Sherry. Billy Joel's album, I think it was the Stranger album. The last song on the second side came on, and I had not heard it before. So I must have just gotten the tape, and it was a song called "Everybody Has a Dream." By the time the song is over, I am in tears. I've got probably another 10, 15 minutes to get to work, and I'm thinking to myself, "Why the hell am I in tears?" And then I realized for the first time in my life now, of course, I was still very young, but there's lots of dreams that kids have, right? Baseball player, firefighter, whatever the case may be. Well, I'd already left one college. I realized all of a sudden I'm crying because this is the first time I've never had a dream. I walked into the bank that day. I put in my 2 weeks notice. I had no idea what I was going to do, but decided I was going to quit because I couldn't do that anymore. I referenced that story because I know we can't all live our dreams, but we can all have plans that include evaluating what we truly want. It's so passionate for you and I to have the desire to get them to really be able to, as young as possible, decide what they want, whether or not it's meeting their desires, their purpose, their passion, utilizing their gifts, or whether or not it's meeting the expectations that we didn't know we had really adopted from others, right?
Mm. As you were saying that, it just seems so powerful to me because men are taught to dream as kids, but I'm not sure that women are. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like we were taught to get married and have a family. I don't know that we were taught to dream bigger.
We're speaking generally and we're speaking globally, but I would 100% agree with you. And that's why we want to elicit this possibility. And I think that is a lot better now than it was in previous generations. But I really am not sure that it is a circumstance where it has improved a dramatic amount. What we need to be able to do is empower everybody, regardless of the age, to start to evaluate what's going to float our boat, what's going to make them fired up and energized. Because it's almost magical when one of my clients find their inner strength or purpose, Sherry, as you have done, and so many others have done that didn't believe that you had.
Yeah.
And those desires became clear and they discover the person they were always meant to be. I was referencing our coaching path together, Sherry, when you had such a difficulty, and everybody, Sherry, was one of the most difficult people to really work with coaching because she's so intelligent and had already been so self-evaluative. But when you would make these breakthroughs, you just would take them and go to the stars. That's why you were just an absolute star of achieving in that coaching. When we had to nail down what your passion in your life, do you remember what you determined that was?
Mm-hmm. I do. You want to know?
Something you want to share?
Yeah. I mean, I had a child, so it was parenthood at that time, and it still is. It's still my main focus.
That's exactly right. It became the to be the best parent you possibly could, and everything else would take a back seat. And it
Mhm.
was so powerful and passionate because that is typically not something that anybody would consider when we're looking at dreams and plans. But that was yours. And that is why you have been such a magnificent parent 10, 12 years later. It's just magical when somebody is able to make the realization of what is going to be their focus of their life that feeds them rather than meet some societal norm, rather than pretend that we're going to be happy in whatever you're referencing that little girls are expected to do rather than teaching them to dream.
I think it would have been different though. Had I done coaching with you in my 20s and I wasn't already a parent, my dreams would have been very different at that time.
It absolutely would. And right now I'm coaching 3 people that are in their 20s. And you know what the difference is? The difference is that 2 of them are not riddled with pain that they're trying to free themselves of. They actually were referred to me because their parents who were clients felt that that would be a benefit for them to learn about themselves so that they could utilize the coaching to discover and understand themselves more, to free themselves from any outward and external expectations and allow them to learn about what would feed themselves, to find that purpose, find that passion, and really realize what their gifts were.
That gave me goosebumps. That makes me so happy. And I do think the next generation is going to be different. They're getting married later. They don't have the same pressures that we did. So, but that just gave me goosebumps. Thank you for sharing.
Right? It really is because unfortunately, I don't think most people have ever had their authentic inner self revealed to them. And because of that, they're still kind of operating unconsciously with the belief that their wants or their concepts of success or happiness or contentment are truly theirs when they're really not, because it's based on their history, their experiences, or their environment of those expectations that are placed upon them. And those who really have realized what those expectations are often will live in a sense of rebellion of, no, you're, I am not going to follow the expectations that you're presenting. Now, while you mentioned, Sherry, that a lot of young women may not have been given that authority to dream, a lot of young women who have absolutely a dramatic and tremendous amount of strength inside of them will resist some of those expectations in the last 2 generations and really rebel, but it still does not necessarily get them to a point of what's gonna feed them. They merely have discovered what they're not willing to conform to.
I think independent thinking doesn't mean that you're immune to influence. I think awareness is the difference.
Oh, I love how you put that. That's exactly right, because resistance in nonconformity is typically a reaction, right, to the expectations rather than that self-investigative work that results in that awareness. And that awareness that you referenced, Sherry, is the first step that can lead to self-acceptance and self-empowerment, right?
Love it.
It's powerful.
It is.
Now, you, Sherry, are really one of the most independent-minded people I've ever met, which means and really is the biggest compliment I could absolutely get on top of your wonderful heart. And you had as many aspects of your childhood of which you refused to conform, but yours was not out of rebellion, but from evaluation. And it's really likely that some of those dreams or desires still were affected by your external world, like you just referenced, right?
Well, it's like I said though, but it didn't lead me to what I wanted though. It just lead to what I didn't believe in. Like I
Right.
understood
Right.
I didn't think like you. I think the bigger question is, yeah, what do I want?
Right. So that's why, I'm really just echoing what you just mentioned, that just because we're not willing to conform does not mean that we're really digging deep and discovering what will float our boat, what will fulfill us, right? Because that really comes down to what we're discussing, whether people really consider what we want or just a lot of us just do, what's expected of the next normal thing. And that's whether or not it's having a child, having a family, whatever the scenarios are. That's where we run into so much of the automatic, almost like an elevator lowering down and pushing down on the dreams or the hopes or the even the concept of dreaming or hope. Does that make sense?
It feels like your life is already scripted for you. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's exactly right. My wife sometimes, Sherry, says, you sound a little preachy on these podcast episodes. And so I wanted to make, I may understand a lot now and wanting to teach all my coaching clients and empower our listeners now, but that doesn't mean that I didn't run through a heck of a lot of problems growing up and in life has really brought me to this point. So I don't want anybody to think I've got all the answers. I may have a lot of the answers now, but I sure as heck didn't then because I didn't know I could dream either. Whether or not we have that ability, we just need to make sure that regardless of what we're teaching young people, we need to make sure we understand when an expectation is placed upon us.
The expectations can be loud and limit our choices, and it can make trusting ourselves feel risky. So, it is important to recognize.
Yeah, it sure is. You had mentioned that you had a scenario of a friend years ago who had really not evaluated what she wanted. She had gotten into a circumstance where you feel like sharing that with us?
Yeah, I had a friend, this was a while ago now, but she was in a marriage where he was not that nice to her, but they had built this world together, and they had a lot of societal influence, they had a lot of money, they had parties all the time, just big, lavish, beautiful parties and trips, but she wasn't happy, right? On the outside, it looked very happy, but internally, when you see, the way he was treating her, it just I don't know, it made me feel sad, but she didn't wanna give that life up, so she chose to stay even though she knew that he didn't treat her well. He cheated on her at one point, and she still stayed with him.
It's kind of fascinating from, really a psychological standpoint to me, that is. It's always tragic or definitely at least sad when an individual really lives by what they see their world seeing of them.
Mm, good point.
As you and I both know, I talk about our first and our second and our third world views. It's one of the scenarios where I think so many of these people that we are referencing that kind of walk down the store aisle with just kind of like an emptiness in them without purpose, perhaps. It's really because I think a lot of them, unfortunately, focus on what they believe their world will see of them rather than what they want to see of themselves. I really think for so many people, and it might even be the majority, Sherry,
Mhm.
that they never really even have a concept of, I can look in the mirror and say, what do I want to fulfill me? Rather than how do I look in that mirror that others will see?
Well, yeah, according to society, she looked great. She married well, she had the big house, the beautiful children. I mean, she was looking good, right? She did it right.
And there are so many people who absolutely convince themselves that that's enough. And that's the sad part because as they get older, it becomes not enough and they become either unhappy or miserable. A dear friend of mine, The Hunting Wives is a big television show as of late. A friend of mine owns one of the houses that they shoot in that Netflix series. But that series,
Cool.
it really is. It's a neat story, but that series is really about so much of how they're looked at from the exterior, even though they may be very miserable inside. It's really an example, and it does mimic some of real reality where they have convinced themselves that it's enough to be envied rather than to be happy. Does that make sense?
We see it every day. I mean, how many people live like that?
So, what I'd love for all of our listeners is to, at the very least, introduce this episode to every young woman that you know, to every parent that you know, to that has a daughter, because we need to make sure that they hear it from so many different sources, right? I mean, we're not the only source that is trying to empower our youth, Sherry. But the more we hear different things from different sources, different arenas, the more power and the more effect it has, doesn't it?
I agree. No, those are all great points, David. Thank you. And I guess as we wrap up, what message do you want to leave our listeners with today after this episode?
I guess the number one thing is I really would want all of our listeners to consider not only for themselves, but every single young woman that they have in their life. Are we empowering ourselves to really evaluate what will fill our emotional cup? It's so easy for us as parents, for instance. I've got three daughters, Sherry, and they were 5, 3, and 1 when I got to meet them, and I fell in love with them. I had to, at that time, determine how I was going to try to empower them. What I really wanted them to do was to really grow up with the ability and the awareness that they really could do anything from their standpoint. We can't do anything about, elements in our society won't let us do, but we damn well have the ability to empower our children with the belief that they can, because that's the only way that things are going to change, right? Well, that's what I would really like all of us to be aware, is that there's absolutely nothing wrong with and everything right with the ability for us to, not only for ourselves, but for our children, is to really evaluate and get them to decide what is internally fulfilling, and be really aware as parents that we can put on expectations without our even knowing it. And we can do it with love. We can do it thinking that we're helping, that thinking that we're empowering them. We can want them to be doctors because we think that that will give them a great life. But I've met a lot of doctors who wish they weren't, but they couldn't do anything different now because of the financial constraints that they are in. Money does not buy happiness. I used to have a friend that would say it, but it can buy a boat big enough to sail right up next to it. But it really is not the answer. It's what it does for us. If we have a scenario where we've got a young person in our life, or we're evaluating our own existence, start asking whether or not we're fulfilled. Whether or not we're on the path to happiness. I am a person that does not believe that happiness is a continuous state. It's really a collection of more and more moments of contentment and joy that contribute to whether or not somebody is happy. There's just too many people that are not happy. Unfortunately, they contaminate those around them. So we have that ability to empower as many people in our world as possible, that we have effect on our families, ourselves, to look at what we truly want and stop just doing because it's what's expected.
Yeah, I would say coming from where I am now, happiness doesn't come from checking the right boxes. It comes from asking the right questions of yourself.
Wow. I would love for you to put that on our site as a quote, because that is absolutely eloquent. Well said, Sherry.
Thank you.
I tell you what, I think this is a great episode to open up our third season.
It is. Think about what you want before you get into all the other issues that we talk about on this podcast. You can stop it from the start.
Love it. I also love that this is yet another episode where we made Sherry's goose pimples come up.
You did.
That is always a plus to all of our listeners. Well, for Sherry and I tell you what, it's great to be back with you again, season 3. Please, everybody, share our podcast with as many people as you can. Subscribe to it so that you always get the updated one. We'd love to have you back. And Sherry, thanks so much for doing this with me again.
Thank you, David.
For her discovered power, that was Sherry. I'm David. And again, we're here so that we can help her be the she that she was meant to be.